Hello, and welcome to Concept Building. This is going to be a two-part series on how the brain builds concepts and how basically we develop. One thing to note is that development, regardless of what people believe, is not linear. So that means that development does not come with age. So there are milestones that we hit when we are developing. And those are the milestones that a lot of people talk about, like, oh, they should be, sitting up at 3 months, they should be crawling at 6 months, they should be walking at. So those are the milestones that the body goes through development in order for us to see that, the child is developing, the brain is making networks, things like that. But it is not linear. So the thing with development, does not come with age. And so while we look for the milestones at these ages to help us see if they're growing, it's not automatic, which is why it's concerning when children don't crawl or when kids aren't talking at the time that they should be talking. And it's because our development is acquired. Everything that we know, everything that we do, all our development is acquired. That means that it needs to be taught to us. That means that we need to acquire it. That means someone needs to be conceptually telling us things and inputting things in our brain, and our brain needs to take it and make it meaningful and create a concept for it. And it's not very easy. It's a lot of steps. So that's what we're going to learn in this two-part series. Okay, so firstly, what is a concept? Why is this important? Isn't a concept just what we know? Or people might say concepts are just the words that we say. Again, conceptual development is not linear, right? Concept building, knowing concepts, is also not automatic. There's a lot of things that happen for us to learn, okay? So it's important for us to keep going with what is a concept. This is going to be spliced here and there just because I'm at the office and we have lots of things going on right now. It's pretty clear. So just forgive me if it comes back and I'm a little bit disheveled or I start something that's not on topic. I'll try my best to stay on topic. Okay, so what is a concept? So concepts, despite what people think, is any word that is spoken that isn't an article. And I say that it could potentially be a concept because words alone are not concepts. So if you look down at the bottom of the slide, you can see it says words alone are not concepts. And it's confusing because I say at top, any word that is spoken could potentially be a concept. And that is because words, if you go back to our auditory session, words are not actual concepts. They don't have meaning. They're actually not words unless you have meaning behind it. Otherwise, they're just auditory units. They're just sounds. They're just tones that the hair picks up and then dumps back out. Okay. Concepts also have different levels. So you have visual concepts. You've got higher functioning concepts. You have concepts that need other concepts to explain it. Okay. Concepts are not learned automatically. There's 4 levels in our brain that must go through in order for a concept to be formed or to even be fully formed. You can have concepts that are sparse, that you don't really know a lot, but they're there. And we'll talk about how that happens. Concepts will look and be used differently depending on the person. So not everyone's concepts are going to be the same. Okay, this is where the English language, this is where we get in trouble because a lot of the language that we use, English is a low context language, meaning that we use a lot of the same words to mean different things. So like someone's idea of how to bake focaccia versus an Italian grandma's way of how to bake focaccia could be very, very different. But we're saying the same things. How do you bake focaccia, right? The pictures are going to be different. It will also depend on the agents that inform their thinking. So we are all made up of basically other people's thinking, okay? We are all made up of how other people think based off of what they told us, how we feel based off of what someone told us, okay? So a lot of our thinking is informed by what other people have told us, and then we've kind of shaped it on our own way as we grow older. When you're younger, a lot of times, younger children tend to mimic the things that their parents say, just because it's their parents that are informing their thinking. And then having concepts is not thinking. Thinking is an exchange of those ideas, an exchange of those concepts. A lot of people can have concepts about things, but they won't know how to exchange the ideas. And we'll get into that as well. And then, like I said, words alone are not concepts. Okay, so the best analogy that I can give is to think of the brain like a filing cabinet, okay? So your brain is a filing cabinet. Pull out the cabinet or the drawer, and then you have all these different files, okay? And each file has a word. So, like I say the word dog, okay? That file comes up. Just imagine that opens up in your head, and then you have all these events, you've got all these memories, you have different pictures, you have all these things that are in that file when the word dog comes up. Now, what comes up in my file is going to be very different than what comes up on your file, because it will depend on your experience with dogs, how someone shaped your world when it comes to dogs. Maybe you don't like dogs. Maybe you're like my big sister and she got attacked when she was little by dogs. So she's always been fearful of dogs. She's come around, but I can guess that her dog file has some bad memories in there or some cautionary things in there that are out of protection and survival because something traumatic happened to her, right? But concepts can change. Filing cabinets, just like files, you can add stuff. Same thing with the brain. You can add things, you can change things. But just like a filing cabinet, when you have different files, the networks in our brain work the same way. You can think of dog and then you can think of like danger, or for me, dog and love. Those are the two files that kind of come up, and they're like go-betweens. There's a lot of memories that I have of dogs that I really love, really loving memories, things like that. And so that's kind of how our networks kind of get, firing in different directions and thinking about different things, is because depending on what someone says can elicit a lot of different files to come up, okay? Now, here's the thing with filing cabinets in your brain, just like the files in my cabinet, I have some files that don't have a lot of stuff. And this can be true of concepts. This is where I mean that the idea that concepts will look and be used differently, and it will depend on the agents, okay? So like the word politics. Politics, I'm sure everyone has a file for. Everyone has somewhat of a concept for it. But if you were to open my politics file, you see that there's not a lot in there. I don't really dabble in politics. I know of it. I know about like the executive branch. I know judicial branch. I know about government, but that's not politics, right? In politics, like I said before, where it says concepts have different levels, politics is a high level formal concept. And so you need actually a lot of different concepts pointing to politics to explain it. And then you can get to, if I knew politics, you get to a surface level where you could probably draw it and explain politics, but it's not just a very basic, a concrete kind of where you can visually see it, like dog or like even birthday, right? You can see birthday. You can't really see politics. Now, somebody who maybe is a politician could probably see politics. That's kind of like their life, right? Their file is going to be a lot bigger. But that's, again, what I mean by they're all going to be different. It's all going to be depending on how you were informed, and that there's different levels. Okay. And some people's files also have different things in them. So one of the things where it depends on what has been informed is called borrowed language. And so borrowed language is a phenomenon that's been happening in our society a lot, where people hear something, they kind of file it away under a concept that it belongs into. And then when it's time to bring it out, or that concept gets talked about, they'll bring it out and they might say it. Now, how you know if someone has borrowed language is if you ask them, like, well, what do you mean? They might change the subject, okay? Or they might get defensive. And that should tell you right then and there, okay, so they're just kind of regurgitating what they heard. And this is something that happens a lot in our society right now, that it's what I would like to call is kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people have like a little bit of knowledge, but they think that they're an expert on it, and then they speak with authority, but they really don't know what they're talking about. That happens a lot. That happens a lot with a lot of our students. The higher level functioning kids borrow language a lot, but that's also why they get in a lot of trouble, or why they drop levels or get angry really fast, or when, suddenly you might say something and it's like they freak out and it's like, whoa, what just happened? It's because they were having borrowed language. They said something that sounded good, but they really don't know what's going on. And so when you say something that's based off of that, and they don't know what's happening, or it's not what they expected, then they're going to drop levels. For example, like say someone is, just really loves to help, is always helping. Just like, oh, let me help you, let me help you, let me help you. I love to help. I'm a very helpful person. And then you tell them, oh no, I can do it. I got it. Don't worry about it. And they might be used to like, oh, okay, you can totally help me. I would love for your help. And then they're like, okay, great. And they do all that stuff. But what if I say something like, no, I don't really need your help right now. You're a little bit, you kind of aren't helpful right now. You're a little bit more in the way. That's going to cause them to drop levels because they know how to be helpful, but they only know like this area of help, right? You can also be helpful by not doing something, right? If you're getting in someone's way and telling them, I'll help you, but they really don't need your help and there's only one item, then you're kind of in the way, and they're not going to really need your help. And so in that instance, this child saw something happening. In their head, it's like, oh, I can help. But they're not really gauging, that the person doesn't look like they need help. They look like they're fine. It looks like they're busy. Maybe they're talking on the phone. And so you're interrupting them because they never actually learned, what it is to help. You help people that are in need, that look like they're struggling, that are hurt. But, if someone's on the phone and they're talking and you interrupt them, telling them that you're going to help when they're just trying to open the door, and then they can't get in because you block them, then it's just like a whole tailspin, right? And that's just a very simple analogy right now that I could think of. So hopefully that follows. I'm trying to think of other instances, but a lot of times we will say something, and like with our population, kids with autism, because they pick up patterns really fast and they're not conceptually thinking, what they end up like to do is making people complete those patterns. So like, again, the example of, oh, I'll help. And then they expect the pattern of, okay, you can help me. That'd be great. Thank you. I love that you help me. You're so great. And so they're expecting that. And you might even have kids, you might even notice that some kids, when you don't say the right thing, they'll keep pressing you. They'll keep saying like, but I'm helping, because they're wanting you to complete the pattern. That's something that we don't do at Pi. We are very careful to not fall into completing patterns that are meaningless for the kids because they do pick it up really fast. Anyway, so that is basically, in a nutshell, kind of how the brain works as far as like building concepts. Now, how do we actually build those concepts? We need to recognize that there's different levels of concepts. So like I was saying before, you have visual concepts like a chair, pants. Those are things that you can see. Very easy. You can draw them. A lot of our students, we start at this very basic level, just drawing them. And the drawing aspect of concepts is very powerful. I never want to discount that, especially if you have a kid that's nonverbal, or if you have a kid that doesn't really know that they're an agent, that they're a human. So a lot of kids that come to us are nonverbal and they have a lot of behaviors. And it's mainly because they've never had the development that they're a person. So they might have gone through the milestones of walking, talking, eating, things like that. But as far as like actually moving past that stage and developing into a person, a thinking person that has thoughts, can manipulate the things in front of them, a lot of them don't have that because a lot of things have been done for them. And so my best example is one of our students that came to us. He was kind of like a 13-year-old baby. He just kind of cried a lot, would pull his hair a lot, just seeking lots of attention. And so what I did for the first month is I just sat and drew him. I just drew like, this is you and this is your arm. And anytime he looked at something or, motion to something or anything, I would draw it. I would write the word and I would draw him an approximation. And it was very cumbersome. It was lots of time. And from the outside looking in, a lot of people would be like, well, that's pointless. Like, he's not even looking at the board. He's not even doing anything. Like, he's not. And truth be told, the first week and a half, yeah, the drawing, it was a lot of hand over hand. One second. And because, he didn't look, he wasn't really into it. He was just kind of all over the place. But the thing with the drawing is the reason why it works is because when you are in the the peripheral nervous system. So you have a CNS and you have the PNS. So you have your central nervous system, which is your brain, your brainstem, and like everything else, the nerves that kind of connect and like tell your body what to do. And then you have peripheral nervous system, which is basically your outside stuff and like how it feels and how it gets the feedback in the environment back into your brain. And so when you're in the peripheral nervous system and you're actually like doing stuff and you're drawing, the peripheral nervous system will actually take the movement and go into the spinal cord, go up to the brainstem, and actually turn on the visual system and make those shapes in the visual system, despite what you're seeing or what you think your brain is doing. That's actually why the hand over hand, that's why the movement, all of that stuff actually works. Because when they're at this stage, when they're at this kind of level and they haven't developed agency yet or anything like that, one of the things that we really need to do is help them create agency. So they need to know, they need their movement access. So you have your visual, you have your auditory, and then there's movement. And the movement access into the brain is what helps with the visual. So that when I kept drawing him over and over again, day after day, after a while, when it goes into concept building, you have, I'm going to skip ahead. You have your sensory receptors, which is your visual, your feelings, your outside, your movement, and then your auditory. And through repetitions and layers, so for me, repeatedly drawing him, repeatedly saying this is you, repeatedly using those same words and layers of drawing, his visual system, seeing all that stuff, after about a week and a half, he started attending. He would start looking. He started to grab the pen, right? Because all of a sudden the brain is turning on. The brain is making networks. The brain realizes, oh, I'm a person. I have thinking thoughts. Okay. And then his behavior started to disappear. He started understanding a lot more. His receptive language started going higher. And then he actually started trying to talk. And he still does. It's still slow going, but he still tries to say certain words. He actually can say hi. He can say sit. And again, he was completely nonverbal when he came. But when you're working in that system and you're actually doing the layers of repetition, the ideas start to form. So then the pictures are coming up in their head and they can think about it. And that's when language and thinking comes into play. Okay. And so that's why the visual concepts, we always start at just the base of like just drawing them. Anytime we have things that the kids need to learn, the students need to learn, the young adults need to learn, anytime we have those, we always draw first. We always draw them. We always show them because it helps them to see themselves. Now, here's the tricky thing about young, higher functioning kids. A lot of the higher functioning kids, especially with what's that fancy new terminology again? Hold on. It's a new one called PDA, pathological demand avoidance, which is like a new term for, well, maybe not new, but it's like up and coming for people with autism. And I have a problem with this kind of term or diagnosis because the avoidance of all of that is pre-operational. And so these kids are staying in a me, myself, and I like picture area. And instead of correcting them and drawing them, helping them see how they need to be different, helping them see the areas that visually you need to be thinking about we, us, them, sharing ideas with other people, we're letting them isolate and we're taking away demands because it seems like it's too stressful. When what we're doing is we're disabling them even more because we're not giving them the tools and the know-how how to manage these things. There's a lot of things that people don't like to do. I mean, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but there are mornings when I wake up and I don't want to go to work or someone is demanding something of me and I try to avoid it. When I get overwhelmed, I walk away from my work. I get it. Like there are things that we don't like to do and we don't like to deal with, but allowing children to shut out the world because there are demands on them is not a strategy or a concept that we should be teaching these children, right? When there are demands, we need to be teaching them how to handle those demands, take the information and manage their feelings, and then use language to explain, I don't have the time for this right now. This is becoming too overwhelming. We need to give them the language to advocate for themselves. We also need to paint the picture for them to understand that it's just not about them, right? One of the biggest things that we push here at Pi for all of our young adults or anyone that attends our program is that we are a we. We are a they, we are a us. We all work together. We are a community. We build relationships. And so, what I want to do, I need to make sure that it doesn't affect other people. And what I want to do, I need to also make sure that if other people want to join me, that I'm inviting them, right? We're always thinking about not just ourselves, right? In neuroscience, the methodology that we use, there's 4 levels, and this is part of Piaget and Vygotsky's development as well. But you have sensory motor, which is 0 to 2. You have pre-operational, which is 3 to 7, me, myself, and I. We have concrete, which is 7 to about 13, and that's we, us. And then you have formal, which is 14 and above, which is they, them, together, global, right? So those formal type of concepts really look at how we can improve globally together, how the masses can come together. And so that's why like politics involves lots of people, government involves lots of people, business, those kind of formal concepts involve lots of people. And so we are always trying to push for concrete thinking, right? We don't want pre-operational thinking, because pre-operational thinking is me, myself, and I. That's when you're only thinking about you. That's when you only want to do what you want to do. And that's where a lot of these behaviors or, issues arise, is because while we do want to respect what children want and what they're feeling and what they're emoting, we also don't want them to run their lives, because one, they've only been alive for a few years, 13 when they get to us, 14 years, which isn't very long. And two, our feelings are not truth a lot of times, right? We have, for the brain, just so everyone knows, we have hundreds of thousands of feelings, lots of different feelings, okay? But if we were to respond to every feeling we had, we'd be in a lot of trouble, right? We only respond to the feelings that are named feelings, which is emotions. Emotions are the named feelings, okay? So like sad is a named feeling. When I have this feeling, I know that this feeling is called sad. When I have this feeling, I know that that feeling is mad, which could also be different than angry, which is also could be different than rage, right? Hundreds of thousands of feelings that can tell us different things. But if we, again, let our feelings rule how we think, how we operate in the world, we're going to get in a lot of trouble, especially if we're at a pre-operational stage. And going back to the high functioning kids, when they are higher functioning, a lot of times the pre-operational kids will not want to see other kids in their picture. They'll tantrum, they'll throw fits, they won't like it. I've seen it actually. Drawing kids, especially if they've done something wrong, and you draw them and draw what actually happened and draw them in the wrong, they will not like it, because their picture is all about them. And by not addressing certain things, a lot of these kids come to us and they haven't addressed these things. In fact, you've created more of a fixed mindset, again, where it's me, myself, and I'm the greatest, I'm the best, I am ruler of it all, and everyone else works for me. That's the kind of thing that when we play into those feelings and emotions at that pre-operational age or stage, and we don't realize that how they're feeling, we need to shape, and we need to give them concepts to understand how to deal with these things in a more concrete thinking pattern, in a more we pattern, right? If Johnny takes, if Johnny is playing with something and someone comes and grabs it out of Johnny's hand, it's understandable for Johnny to be very upset and want to hit them, but we don't want them to hit them, right? We say, okay, so if you hit, little Sean because he took your toy, what does that solve, right? How can you be better, right? And they might not like this. They want you to just fix it. They want you to just go and grab it from them because they want to kind of do the same thing that was done to them, right? They don't have the higher level of thinking, which is why you as the adult need to come in and recognize they are a child in need of shaping. They're a child in need of someone helping them understand why this behavior of maybe hitting someone or why this behavior of melting down and crying in the middle of the store is not acceptable in order to get what we want or to state how we're feeling, right? So sorry, that was a very long thing about visual concepts and how they start and why the base concepts are really important. Okay. Again, base concepts of feeling. Feelings are very base. Emotions can be higher level thinking. Technically, there's some emotions that, like perturbed, as even though it's a synonym for annoyed, it technically is a little bit higher functioning. Other things, depressed is a harder, higher concept to understand because it's not just sad, right? Depression can manifest in a lot of different ways. And so that's a name feeling that is pretty broad depending on how someone interprets it, right? Other different levels of concepts that we have are time concepts. So time concepts, as I mentioned before, are learned in the auditory system. So a lot of kids that come to us, they don't have a good grasp of time because it's learned in their auditory system. You can show them all the timers in the world. You can show them all the clocks in the world. It's still going to be really hard for them. And I will say just, some time concepts that will help you understand, but also confuse you more about how it's learned in the auditory system is like things like after, things like later, a while, soon. Those are all time concepts that you can't visually see. Okay. And so the distance and the timing and like the length it takes for things to hit your ear when someone says, okay, we can do it after, right? There's a gap in the space that happens when someone says it. And then when that thing that is supposed to happen after actually happens. And that is what will shape what after means to us. Okay. And that's why people's after will always differ. Because like when someone says, oh, I'll get to you after I'm done with this, with, my email, I tend to not think that people are going to get back to me until like 9:00, just because to me, there's a lot of emails. Whereas someone else, you might think that after this email means, okay, in the next 10 minutes, I'll be there in a while, or I'll be there for a while, can be very different. For me, a while is about 15 minutes. For someone else, a while is about 30 minutes. And it really just depends on the minute I said it to the length of time where the sound frequencies hit my ear again, where I say, okay, I'm done, right? I've been here for a while, I'm all done. So it's all those languages that get repeated with layers constantly that shape us for those time concepts. Same thing with later. I'll do it later. How many times have you been really mad at your kid for chores that they said they would do later and they never did it until, for you, maybe like, after they went to bed or the next day. But for them, it's later. And if if you're a 2-person household or anything like that, you should check if your partner also maybe uses the word later like your kids and not the way that you use it, right? Because again, concepts all differ from person to person. Soon. Again, I'll see you soon. In my world, I see you soon is I'll see you in a week. Okay. In someone else's world, I'll see you soon could be I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. It all depends. And then we've already talked about higher level thinking concepts. These are concepts that need other concepts to explain them. And quite honestly, like I said, if you are an expert in these areas like business, internet, Maybe you don't need a lot of concepts to think about it, but to explain it to someone else, you probably will. And then concepts must carry meaning for it to be thought about. And so in this level, ideas can be formed. So we can have a lot of ideas. So like our students that are nonverbal have a lot of ideas. They know that they're a person and they have ideas about who they are as a person. But do they think about like, how am I going to eat, or when is my next meal, or things like that? No, because they don't have those concepts yet. So they're not thinking about that yet. Their thought process for some of them that are nonverbal that are just coming up is, okay, I'm going here. Okay, what do I, and then that's probably about it, actually. I'm at pi, and it's very present. There's not a lot of like thinking about future things. Chances are when they do think about something future, they act upon it. So like, it's not that they're thinking about when is lunch, it's that they have a feeling of hunger, so they'll act upon it. So they'll get up and just go get something to eat, right? And if you have that, instead of allowing them to just do that, especially if it's, say, is a problem at your house, you know, they're just eating at all hours of the night, that's when you need to come in as an agent and explain to their agency, their development, why it's not okay, right? That's when you come in and you say things like, you stop them and say, hey, it's not time for lunch, or it's not time for dinner, or you just already had lunch. You can't be hungry now. Are you bored? If you're bored, we can find something to do, right? So you give them meaning. You help them understand the world around them, okay? Okay, how are concepts learned? Now, this is after this slide. Let me see. Yeah, I think after this slide, we'll probably stop, and then we'll pick up. I'll do a part 2 and go from there, just because I don't want to run out of time. And we're already at half hour mark. Okay, so how are concepts learned? So, okay, so this is easier if I can draw it. So the first level is your sensory receptors, okay? So here you are. Can you guys see? Hopefully, this way. Okay. And your sensory receptors are your hands, that's the feelings, the movement, okay? Okay, your eyes, and then your ears, okay? And then your ears, which we talked about in the auditory system, pick up tone, pitch, distance, frequency, okay? So that's where that picks up. Your eyes take in light, shadows, okay? Actually takes on the photons from the lights, okay? So like the bouncing back and forth from the light to your eyes, okay? So that's actually what our eyes are picking up, okay? Our visual system actually picks up millions of visuals a day, but it only processes 100,000 that matter to us, okay? So the best way I can explain that is like, is if you are like, say you're driving, and this has happened to me before, where you're driving, and then all of a sudden like it's like the same path, but then like this big thing all of a sudden appears, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's that? I've never seen that before. There's a good chance that you have seen it, or at least your visual system has picked it up. It's just that because it was meaningless and you didn't know what it was, like it probably didn't have a shape, maybe it was construction, and then all of a sudden it was like, it looked like something, then your visual system was like, oh, and then your brain was like, oh, we need to figure out what that is. And so then it turned on. It was like, important. And so that's what it means by, it takes in, your visual system takes in millions of visuals a day. It just only puts in the stuff that's important to you, okay? And so now at the sensory level, everyone starts out at that level where everything is learned through your ears, eyes, and your movement, okay? Now, the thing is, at a baby's stage, okay, so when they're babies, so how we acquire our development, okay, is that when we're babies, okay, here's mom, okay, we are an extension of mom at this stage, okay? So all of our thinking is mom's thinking, okay? We make a reaction, we might cry, rah, and then mom goes, are you hungry? Are you tired? Okay, so mom is doing our thinking for us. is helping us think. And again, through those layers of mom talking all the time and the reciprocity that happens with baby, reciprocity is a really important thing. One of the things that I've found in my line of work is that the kiddos that had autism, they weren't very reciprocity. Like they just didn't have a lot of like communication really, and they were more on the quiet side. And so a lot of the parents didn't know that they needed to be engaging and have that reciprocity, because it's hard. It's hard to interact with somebody if they're not giving you anything back, right? That's one of the things, one of the tactics that we use is called flooding with language. So a lot of our nonverbal kids, when they come, I flood them with language. So I pretend that they're talking to me. I pretend that they're saying all sorts of things to me, because I'm trying to paint a world for them. I'm trying to paint a picture for them. And so at this age, like lots and lots of language, lots and lots of talking is good. This is good. Never take away language. Never, ever do that. Because if you take away language, you take away concepts, the brain can't develop. Remember, our development is acquired. So if mom or dad, isn't giving the feedback or the language or anything to baby's going to grow up with less information, right? Those development, those networks aren't going to happen. Okay. And so now we're at level 2, repetition and layers. So through the layers of repetition, through mom going, oh, do you want mama? That the auditory system, those tones will start to pick up. It will start to fire because the visual system now sees mom. We have the lights. We're getting the picture. Okay. Because remember, babies are born with world vision and world hearing. Okay. So there's nothing like, everything technically in the visual system is 2D. So it's all flat until meaning starts to happen and until baby starts to walk, then it starts to turn into 3D. But until layers start to happen, baby doesn't really see mom. Mom's not really there in the beginning, but the ideas start to form again on level 3 when we have the repetition of layers through the sensory receptors with mom talking, right? And so then now here's baby, okay? And baby is now up. Okay, how do we get the 3D images? Baby gets up, starts to pull themselves with the table, starts to feel the table, starts to go around the table. Oh, this has a shape. This isn't flat, right? Oh, there's things bouncing off. I can see a surface. Oh, that cup that I want is on that surface. We start grasping, we start reaching. Mama responds. Mama sees that. Oh, do you want your bottle? Do you want a drink? Are you thirsty? Right? Those are all things that we should be doing. Maybe baby's not hungry, just wanted to grab it, throws it down. Oh, you threw down your baby bottle. Okay, so then you're not thirsty. That's fine, but let's not throw it on the floor. Let's keep it on the table so that we can make it clean, right? Language. How do we teach kids to be clean? Start at a very young age. Just tell them to be clean from a very young age. They'll learn it, right? Kids will not know anything unless you teach it. Same with adults. We have a lot of young adults that grow up and they don't know how to take care of themselves. Why? Because no one's taught them. Everything's been done for them. Got to take some stuff out. Let them figure out how to use the stuff in their brain, right? And so then we're at the 3rd level. Ideas start to form. Okay, more language. Thinking happens. Oh, table. Mom's like, yeah, you're pulling yourself up of the table. Good job. And then now we are thinking. Now we have words and we can say mama. And then mama responds and it's all good. And then, oh, that's a good thing. That's a good feeling. And then baby likes that, right? So that's how concepts are learned. Now we have a file named mama. Okay. Now we're creating a file for dada. Now we're creating a file for sister. I don't know. Now we're creating a file for hungry, for baba, for ball, things that we like. Okay. The language centers in the brain, the Wernicke's and the Broca's areas will start to light up. And that will signify the mouth and the tongue and everything to start taking shape. Now, if you ever hear that your kid isn't doing the right sounds or anything like that, don't hesitate to correct them. Start correcting them at a young age. Look at where their tongue placement is. Think about where your tongue placement is. One of the hardest sounds to make is the sound, like nose. A lot of kids can't make that noise. They'll do it through their throat, not with the tongue up there, right? One of the things I always say is, can you say nose? Because most people can say nose, and then I'll be like, okay, so then if you can say nose, it's the first sound, it's just like you say nose. Okay, those are the things that we need to fix. Today, the funniest thing even happened where I was telling the kid, you need to tape up the box. You need to tape up the box. He kept picking it up. He kept picking it up. I'm like, okay, so what's happening right now? I was like, do you not know what it means to tape up a box? And he was like, tape? And I was like, yeah, I'm saying tape. He thought I was saying take the box, take up the box. I was saying tape up the box. He heard take up the box. So he was doing what I said, take up the box. He kept taking it up. And I was like, no, tape. He was like, oh. So then he put it down. But again, the language there, we don't know what the auditory system picks up. We have no idea, right? And this is where we need to come back. We need to be teaching them the concepts. We need to understand language. A lot of things can be solved if we pull back and look at our language, okay? Everything must be taught. All concepts will be taught. Every little thing has to be taught, from basic necessity, advocating, using our language, even the kids that don't have language. So again, you might be like, okay, but that's great, but my kid is nonverbal. Even the student that's nonverbal can be doing stuff, can point, and will talk. You can give them choices. A lot of the times with our nonverbal students, what I'll say is, show me. Can you show me? Can you show me what you mean? Take me. Show Miss Lee. And they'll show me, because, from the beginning I'll be like, is this what you want? Is this what you want? Here, let me take you. Show me what you want. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? And I don't ever give up, because especially if a student is wanting to talk or wanting to do something, that's when you want to engage them. And so, if your babies are really, really like rambunctious, or you have young toddlers that can't go to sleep, there's a good chance that they're also in a rapid growth rate. And so that happens at certain ages where the brain really is picking up stuff and really wants to learn. And that's one thing that we need to always remember, is that if the child is ambulatory, if they can walk, they will want to learn. The brain loves to learn. The important thing to remember is, how are we teaching them? Are the concepts meaningful? Do they even understand the words that we're saying? If a child doesn't know the concepts on a worksheet and it's just a bunch of words, you cannot blame a child for having a behavior because it's overwhelming. If someone were to give me like a doctor's form to look at and fill out, I probably would just toss it aside. I probably wouldn't want to look at it. I have the behaviors to know to walk away. Okay. Now imagine that they're 7 and 8. They don't have the concepts. They don't have the language. School's been difficult for them. They have all these expectations. And then they're given this paper to do something, and they don't know how to do it. And yet they're being told that they should do it. No one's helping them. In the past, maybe they've said they don't understand it, and people have told them that they've lied, because maybe they were good at it like 2 grades ago, right? And then they're going to have a behavior, and it's like, oh, he's a bad kid. Da, 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 da. Simple thing. Okay, so what is the problem? A lot of times it's like, okay, do you not understand what this is saying? And it can be as simple as circle the letter, circle the ending word, circle the ending letter, right? Those words, those concepts, even on directions, can be overwhelming, because if they don't know what ending letter means, if they don't know what circle means, we even had to teach a child the other day what it meant to circle a letter. She kept putting a circle next to the letter. It was just like, no, circle the letter J. And so she would put a circle and by J. And so I had to tell her, like, no, you're making a circle go around the J. Like, she didn't understand that. And she kept struggling with so many different worksheets that we had. But it was as simple as, oh, she doesn't know what it means to circle. A lot of times it's a very simple, again, like tape up the box versus take up the box. Very simple. And he's had this trouble for like months. We just now are figuring it out. But that's how tricky language can be. That's how tricky concepts can be. Okay. If we have the mindset that this is the way they are and they can't learn and they're going to have behaviors, and we make all these little assumptions about them, then they're never going to rise to the expectation that we want them to be. My belief is to always operate from the least dangerous assumption. And what is the least dangerous assumption? Is that they can shoot for the moon. Because if I think they can only shoot for the horizon, I'm never letting them go past that. So if I lower the bar here and say they can actually reach here, I've caused them to not reach their potential. This is a dangerous assumption. The least dangerous assumption is to think that they can shoot for the moon, because at least they'll still land on the stars if they don't. right? And so remember that everything has to be taught. Concept must be taught, okay? The key role played in conceptual thinking by verbal stimuli is due to the human ability to use articulated language, which allows us to name absolutely all aspects of our nonverbal objects, processes, and events. So language is a very important thing for us. It allows us to talk to people, to explain things, to name things, allows our senses to figure out what's going on in our environment. And so if we take away conceptual thinking, if we take away language, we are hindering our students even more. The words you utter express your ideas, okay? But when I hear those words, I can only interpret them as signs of my own. So again, if you are explaining something to a child and you're giving a child a direction and they don't understand, or they look at you like a dead in the headlight, they have a behavior. Remember, they can only interpret them as signs as their own, meaning they can only interpret them whatever they have. Right? They might not have all the concepts that you have. Again, telling me to explain politics, I'm not going to like that because I don't know how, right? I can only interpret it as my own. If you don't help others understand your picture, you'll always be in disagreement. Okay, one of the best things we always do here is, what are you thinking about? What's your picture? Because if you ask a room full of 50 people to tell you who Christopher Columbus is in one sentence, most everyone's response will be different. And it's the same words. Okay, that's why we get into trouble. Okay, so what happens when people don't have concepts? This is what we're going to stop with. So how do we find out? How can we see? How can we recognize when people are struggling, when they don't have the concepts, when they don't have the language? We're going to get into that and how to combat it. So the next one will be pitfalls, continue, and then how to make those connections meaningful, how to come back and make them meaningful, and different strategies. So that will be our next that will be the next YouTube, and that will come out next week. So for now, just watch this. Please leave me any questions or comments that you might have. Anything you want to learn more of, please write it in the comments and questions, and we can make it more webinars. But that's it for today. Thanks.